At 9:45 p.m., Piper Alpha's working condensate pump tripped. The night shift turned to pump A. Its pressure safety valve was missing, and nobody on that shift knew it. The pump was one level below the missing valve. The start control was local. The information that joined those facts had been split across permits and handovers. At about 10 p.m., condensate ignited in C module. The first explosion damaged the platform. The pipelines connected to it would keep feeding what came next. By the end of the disaster, 165 people on Piper Alpha and 2 rescue crew members had lost their lives. To understand why, we have to follow one relief line, 2 maintenance jobs, and an information system that failed at the moment it was needed. Piper Alpha stood in the North Sea, about 110 miles northeast of Aberdeen. It operated as a production platform, processing oil, gas, and water through one tightly packed industrial structure. At its designed rate, that factory could process roughly 250,000 barrels of oil a day. Material moved through it continuously, under pressure, across several tightly packed levels. Across the production deck, 4 modules divided the work: wells in A, separation in B, gas compression in C, electrical equipment and utilities in D. The accommodation stood above that machinery. Cabins, the galley, and the emergency command area occupied the same structure as the process plant below. In July 1988, Piper was also running an older gas processing arrangement called Phase 1. It had seen little use for years, then returned only days before the disaster. Phase 1 produced condensate, a light hydrocarbon liquid separated from the gas. 2 injection pumps sent that liquid back into Piper's oil stream. The arrangement looked simple. One pump ran, the other waited on standby. On the evening of the 6th of July, Pump B was working and Pump A was unavailable for maintenance. There was no automatic changeover. If the working pump stopped, somebody had to go down to the standby pump and start it from the panel beside the machine. Pressure safety valves protected the pump's discharge lines. If pressure rose beyond the safe limit, a valve could open and give the trapped fluid somewhere controlled to go. Most pressure equipment on Piper had 2 relief valves. Each condensate pump had only one. For Pump A, that single protection was known as PSV504. But the pump and its safety valve were not beside each other. Pump A sat on the 68-foot level. Its relief line climbed into C module on the deck above. The valve itself stood about 15 feet above the floor of that upper module. From the pump, it was out of sight. From the valve, the start panel below was out of sight. The control room could monitor much of the process, but it could not start either condensate pump. Even a gas alarm needed a second panel to identify the exact detector. So there were already 3 versions of Pump A: the machine below, the relief valve above, and the paperwork describing their condition. The disaster began when those versions stopped agreeing. Pump A had been taken out of service that morning. A coupling problem needed attention, and a larger preventive maintenance job had been brought forward at the same time. That created 2 jobs around the same system. One concerned the pump and its coupling. The other concerned the recertification of the pressure safety valve above it. Late that afternoon, the plan changed. At about 4:50 p.m., the full preventive maintenance work was deferred. The coupling and torque converter work would continue. That mattered because different jobs required different isolations. A pump returned after coupling work could look available, even while another permit kept part of its pressure system open. The valve job had its own document, Permit 23434. The valve had been removed for recertification, leaving the end of its relief line closed by a temporary blind flange. At about 6 p.m., the crane needed to complete the valve work became unavailable. The job stopped. The permit was marked as suspended, and the valve stayed off. The permit system had no formal box for a suspension. The word was written into another field, and the worksite was not checked before the evening developed further. Now the paperwork followed geography, not the process. The pump job belonged with the pump below. The valve job belonged with C module above. Related permits were not cross-referenced. Nothing on the pump permit forced the reader to find permit 23434 and discover that the only relief valve was missing. Suspended permits were kept in the safety office, outside the control room. They were organized by trade, making connected pieces of equipment harder to see as one system. At shift change, active and suspended permits were not systematically reviewed. The next shift inherited the plant, but not a single assembled picture of its unavailable equipment. Maintenance and production also handed over through different conversations and different logs. Each exchange could be accurate in isolation, while the combined state remained hidden. The maintenance handover focused on the coupling work. It did not carry forward the crucial fact that PSV 504 had been removed and had not been replaced. The incoming production operator did not read every live permit. The established practice was to examine hot work permits, not reconstruct every maintenance condition from the files. There was no written handover procedure to close that gap. There was also no formal permit-to-work course for the people authorized to run the system. People learned the permit system on the job. That can preserve good habits. It can also preserve shortcuts until the shortcut feels like the procedure itself. A physical lock might still have stopped the story here, but Piper did not consistently lock or tag the valves that isolated equipment under maintenance. The document had not been joined to the pump permit. The handover had not carried the valve status. The work site had not been checked. The isolation had no consistent physical lock. Then, at about 9:45 p.m., Pump B tripped. A high-level alarm followed in the flash drum, and the night shift needed to restore condensate injection or shut the process down. The inquiry estimated there was about half an hour before shutdown became necessary. It was urgent, but it was not an instant catastrophe. The danger was still invisible information. The lead production operator went to the pumps at once. Pump B would not restart. The standby machine, Pump A, became the only immediate way to keep Phase 1 running. The night shift knew Pump A had been under maintenance. What they needed to know was whether it could be returned. The limited coupling work appeared to offer that possibility. No witness saw the exact start sequence. The inquiry was careful about that. It reconstructed what probably happened from the operator's intentions, their locations, and the physical evidence. Its conclusion was not framed as certainty. On the balance of probabilities, the lead operator tried to bring Pump A back into service. He had a reason to act, the opportunity to act, and only a few minutes beside the local controls. Everything known to him pointed toward a recovery attempt. The inquiry also made the reverse point. An experienced operator would not knowingly start a pump, whose only pressure safety valve had been removed. Nothing in the paper system told him. Nothing in the handover told him. And no physical lock made opening the pump's gas-operated valve impossible. When condensate was admitted to pump A, pressure entered the machine below and travelled up the relief line toward the place where PSV 504 should have been. At the top, the valve was absent. A blind flange covered the open pipe. That temporary closure was now holding process pressure it was not safely containing. Later, testing mattered here. A properly tightened flange did not produce the necessary leak without damage. A flange tightened only by hand could. The inquiry concluded that the temporary flange was not leak tight. Condensate escaped high in C module and fell, producing a low cloud of flammable vapor. Gas detection registered trouble, but the exact detector had to be identified from another panel. In the time available, the vapor found an ignition source. At about 10 p.m., the cloud ignited in the southeast area of C module. The first explosion was violent, but it was still a local process event. The blast destroyed the firewall between modules B and C. Flying material ruptured a condensate line in B, and the next fire was fed by oil. That oil fire spread below the production deck. It reached the part of Piper Alpha, where the platform stopped being one machine and became part of a larger network. Piper's emergency shutdown system acted on its own wells, separators, process equipment, and oil pumps. It could isolate much of the fuel already being produced on Piper. But Piper was connected by pipelines to Tartan, Claymore, and MCP-01. Those lines held large inventories of oil and gas beyond the platform's immediate shutdown. Closing a valve at Piper did not erase the material already inside those pipelines. Continued production elsewhere could also keep pressure and flow moving toward the emergency. For roughly 20 minutes, the oil fire heated the Tartan gas riser where it reached Piper Alpha. The pipe remained a pressurized connection to another installation. At about 10:20 p.m., the Tartan riser failed. A full-bore release produced a vast jet fire fed from the connected gas pipeline rather than Piper's original leak. The pipeline then took close to an hour to depressurize. Its stored inventory had become a reservoir of fire attached directly to the damaged platform. The inquiry found that earlier shutdown on the connected platforms would have reduced flow and probably delayed that rupture. It could not conclude that it would have prevented it. The connected installations had not regularly practiced this scenario together, a major fire on one platform demanding rapid production decisions on another. On Piper, the first blast had already damaged the control room and main electrical power. The place meant to coordinate the emergency was one of its earliest casualties. Normal lighting disappeared. Emergency lighting lasted only for a limited period. Alarms and communications worked unevenly as heat and damage spread through the structure. The firewater system was damaged, and the diesel fire pumps were not in automatic mode. They were normally kept on manual whenever divers were in the water. There was no switch in the control room to restore them to automatic operation. Reaching them now meant entering a plant already torn open by fire. There were 226 people on Piper Alpha that night. Most were not at the pumps or in the control room. Many were off duty in the accommodation above. They did not hear a clear public address order to evacuate. No general alarm organized what followed. People understood that something terrible had happened, but not what route remained. Many gathered in the galley and waited for instruction or a helicopter. The helicopter deck and conventional lifeboat routes were becoming unreachable through fire and smoke. There was no organized abandonment. Individuals and small groups began making their own decisions, often using their knowledge of the platform rather than a functioning command system. The result exposed a brutal difference. About 63% of those on duty survived. Among those who were off duty, the figure was about 13%. People already outside the accommodation were more likely to see conditions, know alternative routes, and act. Those gathered inside were waiting inside a failing system. At about 10:50 p.m., another violent escalation probably came from the MCP-01 connection. The force was felt a mile away, and debris traveled hundreds of meters. That event destroyed the Sandhaven fast rescue craft and killed 2 of its crew. Those 2 deaths are included in the full recorded Piper Alpha toll. Around 11:20 p.m., the Claymore connection probably failed as the pipe deck collapsed. By then, the platform's separate systems were being consumed in sequence. 61 people survived. On Piper itself, 165 did not. The inquiry's task was not only to describe the fire, but to find why so many protections failed together. It would be easy to reduce that answer to one permit left in the wrong place. The inquiry explicitly rejected that kind of explanation. A document had disappeared from operational view, but it was only one broken link. The failure was systemic. Permits were not consistently used as the written procedure required. Physical isolation, filing, cross-reference, and handover all had gaps. A rule can exist and still fail as a control. If staff learn it informally, if routine work bypasses it, and if nobody audits the gap, the form becomes theatre. Piper Alpha had received an earlier warning. In September 1987, a worker died during maintenance after the scope of a job changed without a new permit. The prosecution that followed included an allegation about inadequate communication between the day and night shifts. Permit scope and handover were already part of the evidence. A memo called for clearer permit descriptions, but witnesses told the inquiry that the way shifts handed work over did not change after the fatality. Early in 1988, a worker also criticized the permit system and communication at a safety seminar. The problem was not unknowable. It was visible without becoming corrected. Then, in June 1988, government inspectors visited Piper. They concluded that lessons from the earlier death had been learned. The visit came less than a month before the disaster. But the inspectors had not watched a shift handover. They sampled permits and spoke to staff, while the major defects in how information traveled remained unseen. At the same time, Piper remained in production through extensive construction and maintenance. Phase 1 was running, equipment was being recertified, and senior roles were vacant or temporarily filled. That abnormal workload placed more decisions on the lead production operator. The inquiry found the decision to continue production under those conditions difficult to understand. The inquiry described a casual and unsafe operating culture. It did not place that culture beyond management. It found monitoring and auditing inadequate. A proper audit, it concluded, would probably have exposed and corrected many of these practices. The missing valve was a final condition, not the first warning. The inquiry's answer was not one more isolated rule. It recommended a safety case for every offshore installation, including existing ones. It shifted the question from whether rules existed to whether control could be demonstrated. The operator would have to show that major hazards had been identified and controlled. That meant explaining the whole system, not merely producing a folder of separate procedures. It also had to address the temporary safe refuge, escape routes, and evacuation. Those protections needed to endure long enough for people to survive a major event. The safety case was not meant to be written once and placed on a shelf. It had to change when equipment, work, or operating conditions changed. At equipment level, the inquiry recommended locks and tags on isolation valves. A lock on pump A's isolation would have made the hidden condition physically harder to defeat. It recommended keeping isolations in force until every related job was complete, and making permits visible so operators could see which equipment remained unavailable. The point was to join work that the old filing system had separated. Pump, relief line, valve, and isolation had to appear as one operating condition. The inquiry also recommended moving offshore safety regulation away from the Department of Energy and into a dedicated division of the Health and Safety Executive. New safety case regulations came into force in 1993 and largely implemented Cullen's recommendations. Operators now had to demonstrate their control of major hazards. The current United Kingdom offshore regime in external waters is governed by the 2015 Safety Case Regulations. The law has changed, but the underlying task is recognizable. Know the real state of the plant. Keep that state visible when work changes. Make the safe condition physical, and verify that practice still matches the procedure. If you want more investigations into the disasters that rewrote ordinary safety, subscribe to Built on Warnings. Each one begins with the safeguard we now take for granted. That safeguard is not finished work. In December 2025, the Health and Safety Executive warned that process isolation failures remained a major cause of offshore hydrocarbon releases. Inspectors found that procedures often followed official guidance on paper. The failures appeared in practice: weak hazard identification, poor planning, inaccurate diagrams, and missing methods. That is the same uncomfortable distinction Piper Alpha exposed. A written system can look complete, while the people using it are being given an incomplete plant. Return to Pump A. The operator could see a machine, a local control, and an urgent process problem. He could not see the missing valve one level above. That does not make every modern isolation failure another Piper Alpha. It means the old problem can return in ordinary forms: a stale drawing, a changed job, or an assumption left untested. Picture the isolation as it should exist now. The line diagram is accurate. Every energy source is identified. The method describes the work that will actually be done. A physical lock holds the safe state even when somebody has incomplete information. A tag explains why the lock exists and who controls it. Related permits point to one another. The operator does not have to know which office, deck, or trade happens to own the other half of the hazard. The handover reviews what remains open, suspended, and unavailable. It transfers the state of the plant, not merely the list of jobs people remember discussing. Then the larger system checks whether those controls still work under real pressure. Change production, overlapping maintenance, temporary staffing, and an emergency nobody scheduled. That is what the safety case added, a demand to prove that the pieces work together and to prove it again when the installation changes. None of these safeguards looks dramatic. Locks, tags, linked permits, handovers and audits are deliberately ordinary. They stop the dramatic event before it begins. They preserve consequences later workers should never witness. On Piper Alpha, the pump, the missing valve, and the permit were all real. What was missing was one trustworthy view that joined them before the start control was touched. That is the warning Piper Alpha left behind. A system can let someone act reasonably on a picture that nobody has made complete.